What's going on, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. We're going to continue with On Guerrilla Warfare by Mao Zedong today. This is Chapter 5, Part 3. We're going to finish up the chapter today. There's two parts here. This is on the organization of guerrillas. And for anybody who's listening to this book who doesn't think that it is at all relevant today, I'm not so sure. I always apply what I'm learning in this book to online warfare. That's what Political Fight Club is about. Waging as much online warfare as possible for poor people and against the corporations. That's what we do. And that comes in the form of fighting propaganda, doing disinformation and memeing, and causing chaos where we need to, whatever we need to do. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that there isn't some practical application with wherever you happen to be listening to this. If you guys have seen what's happened in the last couple of days, the Palestinians in the West Bank broke through the walls and they've taken over 12 or 13 settlements from the Israelis, taken back their land, as it were. And I'm just saying, there seems to be a pattern. There's a lot of poor people rising up and fighting against their oppressors right now, which means that there's going to be a lot of actual revolt across the globe, and this shit might be useful to you practically when shit really hits the fan here in the future. In the U.S., this certainly could be useful. Organization of actual on-the-ground guerrilla operations is not a bad thing to know about, so just pay attention. This is page 43, Equipment of Guerrillas. In regard to the problem of guerrilla equipment, it must be understood that guerrillas are lightly armed attack groups which require simple equipment. The standard of equipment is based upon the nature of duties assigned. The equipment of low-class guerrilla units is not as good as that of higher-class units. For example, those who are assigned the task of destroying rail communications are better equipped than those who do not have that task. The equipment of guerrillas cannot be based on what the guerrillas want to even what they need, but must be based on what is available for their use. Equipment cannot be furnished immediately but must be acquired gradually. These are points to be kept in mind. The question of equipment includes the collection, supply, distribution, and replacement of weapons, ammunition, blankets, communication materials, transport, and facilities for propaganda work. The supply of weapons and ammunition is most difficult, particularly at the time the unit is established, but this problem can always be solved eventually. Guerrilla bands that originate in the people are furnished with revolvers, pistols, rifles, spears, big swords, and landmines and mortars of local manufacture. Especially in the U.S., we got a ton of that shit. Just sitting around. Go anywhere in the Midwest or in the South. You can't walk 10 feet without running into a pistol or a gun or a rifle or a landmine. Other elementary weapons are added, and as many new type rifles as are available are distributed. After a period of resistance, it is possible to increase the supply of equipment by capturing it from the enemy. In this respect, the transport companies are the easiest to equip, for in any successful attack, we will capture the enemy's transport. An armory should be established in each guerrilla district for the manufacture and repair of rifles and for the production of cartridges, hand grenades, and bayonets. Guerrillas must not depend too much on an armory. The enemy is the principal source of their supply. For destruction of railway tracks, bridges, and stations in enemy-controlled territory, it is necessary to gather together demolition materials. Troops must be trained in the preparation and use of demolitions, and a demolition unit must be organized in each regiment. As for minimum clothing requirements, these are that each man should have at least 2 summer weight uniforms, 1 suit of winter clothing, 2 hats, a pair of wrap puttees, and a blanket. Each man must have a pack or a bag of food. In the north, each must have an overcoat. In acquiring this clothing, we cannot depend on captures made by the enemy, for it is forbidden for captors to take clothing from their prisoners. In order to maintain high morale in guerrilla forces, all the clothing and equipment should be furnished by the representatives of the government in each guerrilla district. These men may confiscate clothing from traders or ask contributions from those best able to afford them. In subordinate groups, uniforms are unnecessary. Telephone and radio equipment is not necessary in lower groups, but all units from regiment up are equipped with both. This material can be obtained by contributions from the regular forces and by capture from the enemy. In the guerrilla army in general, and at bases in particular, there must be a high standard of medical equipment. Besides the services of the doctors, medicines must be procured. Although guerrillas can depend on the enemy for some portion of their medical supplies, they must, in general, depend upon contributions. If Western medicines are not available, local medicines must be made to suffice. The problem of transport is more vital in North China than in South, for in the South, all that are necessary are mules and horses. Small guerrilla units need no animals, but regiments and brigades will find them necessary. Commanders and staffs of units from companies up should be furnished with a riding animal each. At times, 2 officers will have to share a horse. Officers whose duties are of minor nature do not have to be mounted. Propaganda materials are very important. Every large guerrilla unit should have a printing press and a mimeograph stone. I don't even know what that is, but I mean, let's assume today this would be like a online news network, a commentator or 2, journalists that do their content online. They must also have paper onto which print propaganda leaflets and notices. They must be supplied with large brushes. In guerrilla areas, there should be a printing press or a lead-type press. For the purpose of printing training instructions, this material is of the greatest importance. In addition to the equipment listed above, it is necessary to have field glasses, compasses, and military maps. An accomplished guerrilla group will acquire these things. Because of the proved importance of guerrilla hostilities in the anti-Japanese war, the headquarters of the nationalist government and the commanding officers of the various war zones should do their best to supply the guerrillas with what they actually need and are unable to get for themselves. However, it must be repeated that guerrilla equipment will in the main depend on the effort of the guerrillas themselves. If they depend on higher officers too much, the psychological effect will be to weaken the guerrilla spirit of resistance. Our last part of the chapter here, it's about 2.5 pages, Elements of the Guerrilla Army. The term element, as used in the title of this section, refers to the personnel, both officers and men, of the guerrilla army. Since each guerrilla group fights in a protracted war, its officers must be brave and positive men, whose entire loyalty is dedicated to the cause of emancipation of their people. An officer should have the following qualities: great powers of endurance, so that in spite of any hardship he sets an example to his men and is a model for them. By the way, like the head of the top dogs in America, like for instance Lloyd Austin, he doesn't match this at all. He doesn't give a shit about his people. He cares about Raytheon stock because he used to be a board member there. This is completely lost on the American military. In other militaries, it's much more prominent. So it's interesting. Just kind of take a notice here. None of the generals in our country are thinking about what's best for their soldiers or other soldiers of other armies in, let's say, these proxy wars. They're just trying to pad the bottom line of all of the military industrial complexes, weapon contractor companies. So it's a little messed up in our country the way that we do our military. He must be able to mix easily with the people. His spirit and that of the men must be one in strengthening the policy of resistance to the Japanese. If he wishes to gain victories, he must study tactics. A guerrilla group with officers of this caliber would be unbeatable. I do not mean that every guerrilla group can have, at its inception, officers of such qualities. The officers must be men naturally endowed with good qualities which can be developed during the course of the campaign. The most important natural quality is that of complete loyalty to the idea of people's emancipation. If this is present, the others will develop. If it is not present, nothing can be done. When officers are first selected from a group, it is this quality that should receive particular attention. There's a typo here. The officers in a group should be inhabitants of the locality in which the group is organized, as this will facilitate relations between them and the local civilians. In addition, officers so chosen would be familiar with conditions. If in any locality there are not enough men of sufficiently high qualifications to become officers, an effort must be made to train and educate the people so these qualities may be developed and the potential officer material will be increased. There can be no disagreements between officers native to one place and those from other localities. A guerrilla group ought to operate on the principle that only volunteers are acceptable for service. It is a mistake to impress people into the service. As long as a person is willing to fight, his social condition or position is no consideration, but only men who are courageous and determined can bear the hardships of a guerrilla campaign in a protracted war. A soldier who habitually breaks regulations must be dismissed from the army. Vagabonds and vicious people must not be accepted. The opium habit must be forbidden, and a soldier who cannot break himself of the habit should be discovered. Victory in guerrilla war is conditioned upon keeping the membership pure and clean. It is a fact that during the war the enemy may take advantage of certain people who are lacking in conscience and patriotism and induce them to join the guerrillas for the purpose of betraying them. Officers must therefore continually educate the soldiers and inculcate patriotism in them. This will prevent the success of the traitors. So, in a way, Maoism is a little bit patriotic socialism. The traitors who are in the ranks must be discovered and expelled, and punishment and expulsion meted out to those who have been influenced by them. In all such cases, the officers should summon the soldiers and relate the facts to them, thus arousing their hatred and detestation for traitors. This procedure will serve as well as a warning to the other soldiers. If an officer is discovered to be a traitor, some prudence must be used in the punishment adjudged. However, the work of eliminating traitors in the army begins with their elimination from among the people. Chinese soldiers who have served under puppet governments and bandits who have been converted should be welcomed as individuals or as groups. They should be well treated and repatriated, but care should be used during their reorientation to distinguish those whose idea is to fight the Japanese from those who may be present for other reasons. All right, we'll continue on page 49, chapter 6. Next video, the political problems of guerrilla warfare. And it's a short enough chapter, we'll do it in one episode. Keep fighting that good fight out there, guys. Hope you're learning something.